Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This will be a continued update of my saga exposing the CIA's gross abuse of secrecy and violating an executive order and other things in blocking information out of books that are embarrassing to the CIA, which is illegal. Excuse me. I want to start kind of going back to the roots a little bit. Because the evidence I collected of my family's poisoning against the CIA, a federal judge, district judge, ordered the CIA to mediate its settlement. And based on the evidence that I had provided, the CIA signed the settlement agreement and agreed to a certain amount that still wasn't enough, but at least we could find some closure. And that was all fine and good. Here's the settlement agreement that the CIA signed. You can see the signature of their lawyers. They signed a settlement agreement. I'll withhold the amount for now. And we all thought everything was said and done. The procedure worked, and maybe there's actually some constitutionality left in our government. However, 3 days later, we get this memo from the CIA's domestic enforcement arm, the Department of Justice, telling us that if we did not accept half of the settlement that they signed for, that they would execute what they call in this memo the evidentiary privilege, meaning that they would seal our evidence. Essentially, the CIA was trying to blackmail our family to take a lower half the settlement, or they were going to seal the case permanently. Of course, I said, no way, we can't be blackmailed. No, we demand that you abide by the original settlement legal document. So just following that, then, I think it's about a week later, the CIA, now in this memo, it says executive privilege at the bottom here. And I'll be sharing this on my Patreon channel at patreon.com, Kevin_Shipp. And that is kind of what keeps me going financially, since I lost my pension and the CIA blocked my retirement funds. The CIA actually went into the Office of Personnel Management, ordered them to block my retirement funds, which our family needed to survive just after I resigned and provided my evidence. And I talked to the OPM Office of Personnel Management representative personally, who told me the CIA had ordered her to do that. That is a felony. I called her back and I said, do you understand you're committing a felony by bending over and doing what the CIA tells you to do? Well, she didn't know that, got really alarmed. And within a week, I had the cash amount of my settlement. These are the kinds of things the CIA does and gets away with because of its unbridled power of secrecy. And that's why I, along with my coworker, wrote Twilight of the Shadow Government to expose this and demand reform of the CIA and its unbridled power over American citizens. So the CIA claimed in this memo from the DOJ that they threatened to invoke the evidentiary privilege, blackmailed us to accept a lower settlement. We refused. So what the agency did was secretly, in a secret court, without our knowledge, our congressman's knowledge, or anything, they invoked what's called the state secrets privilege, which is a super secret privilege. And I go into that in my book, From the Company of Shadows. Super secret privilege that the CIA abuses to silence whistleblowers, and the NSA used it to stop investigation of the domestic spying program. It is completely unconstitutional, completely illegal, but the CIA slipped that in. And then, because they'd invoked the state secrets privilege, advised our lawyers that we could not talk about my evidence. We could not talk about the case. We could not talk about anything, even amongst ourselves, even to our attorneys, or they would threaten us with prison for violating the state secrets privilege. So much so that in the book, the CIA blacked out, in the epilogue, if you read it carefully, the CIA blacked out what they used to silence our family. And if you go into the bulleted points that I built in there, it will spell out the state secrets privilege that the CIA used to cover up the extreme suffering of especially my wife and oldest son, because of toxic exposure on this covert CIA base, which I'm going to get into this in detail every step of the way, but the CIA was terrified that what was done on that base, what was buried on that base, would get out to Congress and the American people, and they would do anything to stop that from happening. I was advised by a senior CIA IG member that the IG at the time had been ordered to silence me and destroy me at all costs and keep my story from getting to the press. Can it get any more diabolical than this? Well, yes, it does. My point here with Twilight of the Shadow Government, and the reason I brought in a co-author, I'm not a fan of ghostwriters. I think it's not really honest to have a ghostwriter write your manuscript and then you take the credit for it. So Kent and I wrote the book together, and I got him on the front cover because he deserves it. But I wrote Twilight from the Shadow Government and submitted that, worked with it with Kent, and then submitted it to the publisher after I'd submitted to the CIA, who sat on it expectedly for 3 months. I knew they would do that. I knew they would try to stop the book from being published. I knew that they would black out things in the book that I call out regarding their illegal activity, and they knew all of that. So that's why I submitted the book to the publisher. It will go out now, and the CIA cannot stop it. I took a huge personal risk in essentially violating my non-disclosure agreement with the CIA, which is what has to be done for this to come to light and the CIA's actions to be known by the American people. I've gotten one threatening note already from them, and I'm ready for what they may try to do. I have to do this because the American people need to know what the CIA is and how they violate the Constitution, manipulate Congress, and it is a monstrous juggernaut. And in the book, at the end, I give 12 steps to reform the CIA and remove its power of secrecy. Now, as you can imagine, the CIA would not want that published. So I'm sure, we're going to black out that whole thing. I'll give you an example. Lesson learned from the Company of Shadows, the book that I wrote, second book that I wrote recently. I'll give you an idea of what they do with impunity, and they get away with it. Let me go to some chapters here. Here we go. From the Company of Shadows, I wrote about the poisoning of my family on that base. There was black mold all through the house. The CIA knew the house was contaminated before they put us in there. The previous resident, the security officer on the base, he and his family got deathly ill. So they knew that was that the building was contaminated. Also, while we were there, a mustard gas shell percolated up in the yard, and Joey and I both witnessed. We found it. And I was advised by some of the guards that there were piles of ampules in other parts of the base. There was mustard gas buried there. So my son, his blood test looked terminal from toxic exposure. My wife was bedridden with dementia, lost her short-term memory, had headaches so severe they had to put her on morphine. And the doctors couldn't, I snuck them both out for that's all, folks, immunological tests. To a certain expert in the United States without the agency knowing it, and had very detailed immunological tests. If I could get that out, been a rough morning. And anyway, tested their immune systems, and I was advised that my son Joey's immune system looked to the doctor. It was similar to him being exposed to a burst of radiation. Of course, we have all those tests. We have all those tests in writing. The CIA subsequently broke into our house, painted a chemical on the ceiling they thought was invisible. I had a black light, which you use for invisible chemicals, and we found it painted on our ceiling. The house was broken into, and on it goes. So I wrote about that from the Company of Shadows, and I wrote about my family's desperate illnesses, the immunological blood tests. I did it. The immunological blood tests and test results I put in from the Company of Shadows. The doctor's diagnoses of toxic exposure, the break-in and the chemicals being put on the ceiling, and all unclassified, all open source. And this is what the CIA did with it. There is nothing classified here. There is no source or method or anything. This is all unclassified accounts of my family's poisoning on the base. And the publications classification review board is used. They're good people. My dad was on that board, but they're used by the other dark secret parts of the CIA to black out things the CIA doesn't want people to know, especially about their criminal activities, many of which are in Twilight of the Shadow Government. So I'm going to be keeping you guys posted on this. I'm going to be keeping you guys posted on what the CIA tries to do to me. The only thing that will expose the corruption of secrecy is the light, publicity, the American people knowing what's going on. And I've sacrificed my life to do that because I believe in our Constitution. I believe in the American people. I do not know what's going to happen to me. But for me, this is a mission, call to duty that I have to do. So also, if I'll be putting some of these documents on my Patreon channel, plus a lot more. And since I lost my retirement, that's kind of the bread and butter, which keeps me going with this channel. So if you can just go in at the lowest tier and help us out there, we greatly appreciate it. Finally, I learned what the CIA does with authors' documents back in 1991 when I was the senior enter-on-duty briefer for the CIA. And I used to brief people, new people, generals, people from all walks of life, secretaries, case officers. I would brief them their first briefing on the CIA internally and what it does. And back when it was classified, the SR-71 program. Routinely, after my lecture was done, people would come up to me and they would say, can you check into my book? I've submitted it to the CIA for pre-publication review. It's been a year and I haven't heard a thing. I keep asking, they won't respond to me. One guy, his technical report, they had sat on for 5 years and he never heard back. A classic case by a fellow that I interacted with when I came out and started my own security company was James Atkinson of Granite Island Group, a tremendous site on technical security countermeasures and how to locate and find bugs. Very beautifully done. Well, James Atkinson advised me that in an attempt to get a contract with the CIA, excuse me, he submitted a very detailed report, detailed description of his countermeasures, tactics, and equipment that he thought the CIA might be interested in. Well, the CIA took his document, which was unclassified, and they classified it. Once it was classified, they told Jim that he could no longer have access to his own document because it was now classified and he didn't have a clearance. So I saw this mutated process of cover-up going way back to 1991 and repeatedly thereafter. They are not going to get away with this with the Twilight of the Shadow Government. This is a defining moment for American democracy and for holding the deep state accountable and with documentation proving the corruption that is in the CIA. Now, my proposal is to keep the good parts of the CIA that Truman originally designed it for, and that's the Director of Intelligence, which is a fantastic part of the CIA and very good at what they do. The Director of Science and Technology, which comes up with a lot of fantastic technology, and other parts of the CIA that are good and need to stay around and continue to advise the president. It's the Director of Operations, their covert action authority, and they have no covert action authority. In the National Security Act of 1947, it doesn't even give them that. It makes a broad statement. And I'll be talking about more on that later. But the CIA, since its inception, has abused its covert action approval, let's say, to engage in coups, overthrowing governments, responsible for the estimates of about the deaths of 7 million people. And the CIA routinely uses its power of secrecy to silence any dissent. And all the whistleblowers that have come before me, no one has heard of, because the CIA has an exact system to destroy those people. They tried it on me. Sadly, they mess with my kids. And as the saying goes, you can mess with a man, but you do not mess with his family. That was their big miscalculation. So there's going to be more coming as this continues. The book is on Amazon for pre-order right now. It will be released on October the 1st, coming up. It's going to be a good day. I fully expect that the CIA will start coming after me, and I will make that as public as I can. And I believe this is the CIA's day of reckoning. So I appreciate your all's support very much. And come over to Patreon if you can and help us out there. I'll continue to give you updates here. And please spread this video to everyone you know. I'm calling for an avalanche of demand from the American people for CIA reform, and stop threatening. They threatened Tucker Carlson about some of the things he was talking about, threatened him to actually, the director of the CIA called him personally and threatened him to stop discussing things about U.S. intelligence on his programs. I have a well-known author who's a dear friend of mine, had a program on politics and faith, and two men showed up at his door from the government and told him to stop doing that program, or else he would be arrested. That's the kind of thing people are tired of. That's the kind of same thing I'm exposing. Excuse me. And as I mentioned, I'm calling for an avalanche of public demand for the reform of the CIA. So thank you all so much. I believe in you. I love you, and I'll keep these coming. If anything happens to me, I was not abducted by aliens. Anyway, love you, and we will talk to you soon.